There's never been a better time to have SiriusXM. With even more exclusive content, with over 150 channels in your vehicle, including the widest, deepest variety of music, ad-free. Root for your team. Get news. Listen to whatever makes you laugh. And hear all about your favorite stars. Your Platinum Plan offer includes more than ever before to enjoy online, on your phone, or at home. Create your own ad-free personalized stations powered by Pandora. Hear ad-free extra channels filled with music and enjoy favorite shows with SiriusXM Video. Thousands of hours of shows and performances on demand. What you love is on now.
So when it comes to DSP in the car audio world, very few brands have the legacy, history, or pedigree that Audiocontrol does when it comes to playing with that digital signal. Of course, the brand has evolved, and now the offering includes standalone DSP processors with OEM integration features and even DSP integrated amplifiers. Today, we've got their product specialist, Matt Palumbo, in the studio with us to go over the entire range, as well as show you a couple new tricks with a new software revision. This is CMA Workshop Audiocontrol, and it starts now. What's going on, everybody, and thanks for tuning in to another CMA Workshop presented by SiriusXM. I'm your host, Ben Wu, and as we finalize our adventure is the best word, through the jungle that is DSP, we've landed on one of the original brands that have such a strong history processing digital signal. In fact, it's in their name. It's Audiocontrol, and we're going to dive right in. We're going to talk about the entire lineup. We're going to talk about what makes Audiocontrol unique in the DSP segment, as well as talk about a brand new revision to a software that, from what I understand, is coming soon. But before we go there, let's go ahead and invite their Canadian distributor through Gemsen. His name is David Singh, and he is their National Sales Director. What's going on, Dave?
Sales manager, sales director, bottle washer, cook sort of thing, whatever.
Multitasker and car audio extraordinaire guru. How's that?
Long-time employee, we'll just say it that. So happy to see you again, Ben. How are you doing?
Always nice to have you on, Dave. Today we're talking about a brand that I know you hold near and dear to you personally, but also to obviously Gemsen. It's a unique brand because it's a brand that's built a reputation around innovation and also around quality. We know that with their headquarters in the Pacific Northwest, so many of their products are actually engineered, designed, and built in-house. I know that's something they're proud of, and I love hearing that. I think that makes them a very unique player in the game. We have Matt Palumbo will be joining us today. What are you most interested to hear from him today? I mean, I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, but I want to give you that opportunity.
Well, I'm certainly interested about some of the new features that, this will be the first time any audience will hear about some of the new features coming in some of the software. So that's going to be exciting to see. It's always great to look at the Audiocontrol offerings. I mean, there's so many different flavors of DSP that's out there. I believe that Audiocontrol certainly has zeroed in on a particular segment that attracts dealers that are getting into the DSP category and perhaps not that fluent with complex software or some of the things that sometimes can be overwhelming to a lot of dealers that are new to DSP. Audiocontrol has found a way to simplify it, make it easy, and achieve the type of results that you want. So it'll be nice to revisit a lot of those features.
Yeah, you know what? No doubt about it. I've heard the same type of comments through the industry, and they have a way of making it work, simply. Right, the interface is simple. I'm excited to see what the revisions are in the software for sure, because it was already quite simple. So I wonder what they did to it, and just their overall quality of build and quality of sound. I think is something that needs to be addressed here, because from what I hear, I mean, this is a top-notch, great sounding product, regardless if we're talking about the standalone DSPs or the integrated ones.
I agree wholeheartedly. Audio control's been around for 40 years. Signal processing is they practically invented that. I mean, they came to market with products many years ago, DSP related products, long before some of the products that we're playing with now, and they know what has worked and what doesn't work and that sort of thing. And they certainly got a huge engineering staff, not only on the home side or car side, but there's
Right.
side. There's other things. So, their DSP knowledge is deep. Their experience in signal processing goes decades, and they know their stuff. So,
well, I'll tell you what, if you're a dealer tuning into this and you're curious about audio control and how this could fit for your shop, well, strap in. You're going to learn about the type of products they offer, why it's so simple, and Matt's a great teacher when it comes to showing you how it all works. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring in our product specialist. His name is Matthew Palumbo, and he is their national sales director or manager. I don't know. I always swap the two, but let's go ahead and bring him in. What's going on, Matt?
Hey, how are you guys doing today?
I'm doing very well. Please correct me. Is it manager or director?
It's sales manager.
Sales
National
manager.
sales
Very
manager.
Well. Very,
Yep.
very well. Well, either way, we consider you the product expert. So thank you for taking the time to come in today
Of course.
to chat with us about audio control, man.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Now, I shared with the audience kind of my opinion of audio control, its history, and how long you've been around. And I always feel it's just a great, locally engineered, built, design type of product. And Dave did as well. But I'd love to hear from you. For those that are tuning in who might only know audio control for one thing or another. Here we're talking about DSP. Maybe you can start with that.
Yeah, totally. So, with audio control, it's a cool story because we've been around for we're celebrating our 45th year this year, and being a Pacific Northwest company. So, audio control was founded here in the greater Seattle area in Washington State. To this day, we still design, engineer, and even assemble a lot of these products right here in Washington. So we're a Pacific Northwest company. It's not just something we put on the box. It's definitely a part of our kind of pedigree as a company, and something that we are proud of. There's not a lot of companies out there that can say that they are even designing their own products, let alone testing and assembling and building and soldering components on them and things like that. So it's always fun when I get to take someone on like a tour and take them through audio control, and there's always that little bit of wonder, like, do they actually really build anything here? Or are they just putting labels on boxes? And when you take someone through that tour and you see an engineer or an assembler sitting at a workstation with a soldering iron in one hand, and a crimper or flush cut in the other hand or something, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, there's no doubt they're actually building things here.
So it's not just a
pretty
facade. Cool. It's not just a facade.
No,
it's
not
actually going down. Beautiful.
Yep, absolutely.
So we're during the DSP sessions here. We've had a phenomenal run at this. I mean, we really did our best to kind of present all the brands. Audio control is certainly a huge player within this space. Can you give us a preview of what we want to accomplish today?
Yeah, totally. So, with audio control, as you guys kind of alluded to, audio control has been doing DSP for a long, long time. We came out with products, 20 years ago, basically, that were way ahead of their time for the world of DSP, and probably were released too soon, to be totally honest. But on both the home and the car side, audio control is a big player in signal processing. So what we're going to do today is kind of go through the products from audio control that are offered currently, where we kind of got our start and where we're coming from, as well as where we're going, which is this new software update that we're talking about. We alluded to it the last time you and I spoke a little bit, just little tiny.
You didn't really give me much. I'm going to be honest with you.
No, I tried not to. And then today I'm going to be actually showing like a live preview of that and taking you through some of it, showing you some of the features, and give you a quick tour. So
fantastic. Well, without further ado, let's get you set up. We know we're going to start with the presentation. Maybe we'll take a look at some product, and I guess we're going to finish with some software training. Fantastic.
Yes, sir.
Without further ado, let's go ahead and set you up here, Matt, and we'll be back once you're done, obviously, and discuss everything we learned.
Sounds good. All right. Cool. So, my name is Matthew Palumbo. We're going to get into the kind of the DSP side of audio control today. And, for those of you that aren't aware, you'll see it on the screen there. We're now part of the AMP Global, family of brands. So we're in that same category with Stinger and Pack and all the other great power brands from AMP. For those of you that didn't know that or aren't familiar, that's why the logo's on there as well. So some cool stuff happening here coming soon, with that. So part of the things I want to talk about today, though, a little bit is like where we came from, why is audio control involved in DSP? How did we get our start and that sort of thing? And a big part of that is our home side of the company. There's plenty of people out there who don't even realize or know that we have a home side to audio control. And the home side of the business is big. It's a big, big division, arguably just as big as car audio these days. And with the home side, it's really where we got our start in the processing part of it. We started making home crossovers and equalizers and things like that, which quickly developed into things like preamp processors in home situations or custom install situations, home theater, that sort of thing. And so, on the screen there for you, I've got kind of some examples of where we come from, products that have wood ends on them, things like that. Blue LEDs became a really hot thing there for a while. So blue backlit display on that pre-pro processor at the bottom. And then, where we've headed now is a real sleek, modern aesthetic, very clean design, but super high power, super clean processing. Making good sound great is what audio control has basically always been about. And we continue to hold true to that tradition. We are continuing to make good sound great, bring in sound that's okay and make sure it sounds better on its way out. But audio control's whole process and how we do this is really all about making it simple, making it easy. And so when we get into more of the car audio side of things, that's really what we focus on. So we've done, like I said, we've done DSP for a long time. Some folks look at our current DSP offerings and they think that that's all we've ever really done in DSP. The products up on the screen right now were released in like the mid to late 90s. We're talking about things that were way, way, way ahead of their time, into the early 2000s, I should say as well. So we're talking about DSPs with separate digital controllers and, dash mounted controllers with digital displays and buttons and keypads, as you can see on your screen there, and all sorts of variations of that. So with our current product offering, you'll see in a little bit here, we don't really use dash command style units. We stick with more of a traditional knob and LED style, something you could push and click, but something that has a more analog feel to it. It's a knob that you can turn. And what we found is that a lot of consumers really like that. There's plenty of people out there who just don't necessarily want this big screen thing with all these buttons on it. It's cool to a lot of us that are in the industry, and a lot of installers like it and stuff, but for the end consumer, it's just what we found is not always the right thing. So it's not that we can't design a DSP that has that, it's that we just kind of choose to go a different route. And who knows, maybe we'll bring one of those back in the future, but just kind of thought it'd be fun to show some of that older, vintage DSP stuff that we tried years ago. So going forward, into kind of where we're at today, we offer some really cool DSP products, and we have some things that are kind of unique in the marketplace that not everyone offers. Let's face it, these days, just about every brand offers a DSP of some sort, but not all of them offer something quite like we do. And so I'm starting out very simple here with things like the DQ61. The DQ61 is a signal processor. It is a product that's able to take in signal, modify it, control it, tune it, so to speak, and then send it back out the other side. That's essentially a DSP, right? So this is not always considered a DSP by everyone, but that's what this is. The DQ61 is 6 channels of high-level input, 6 channels of RCA low-level output. And essentially what this is a separate front, separate rear, separate sub EQ. It's a line driver. It's a line output converter. It is it's got AccuBass built in. So if you have a vehicle with bass roll off, as you increase the volume, the bass drops off. That's what patented AccuBass is there to restore. And then this also has signal delay, and it's one of the coolest signal delays out there. I love the signal delay in a DQ61 or in the DQ-DX because it doesn't require any measuring. It doesn't require any math. It doesn't require any software. And that's really kind of what makes these first couple pieces we're going to talk about unique, is that there's just really not a lot else out there that does what this does without using software. And if I didn't mention that already, that's one of the things that's kind of special about the DQ61 is it has very analog, old school looking controls because it's knobs and dials and switches, and there is no software involved, but it's still doing, probably 70 to 80% of what most people are doing with their DSP. Signal summing, equalization, AccuBass, time correction, That's what most people are doing with their DSP. That's exactly what you can do with the DQ61. Now, is it everything that a, big bad $1,000, high channel count DSP is? No, of course not. But for, say, half to a third of that price, you're getting something that does a lot of what most people need without having to go crazy with software and big budget. So that's the DQ61. That gives you the ability to do a lot. Something that you'll notice too as we go through these products that you'll see right now in the DQ61 is our input capability. On the DQ61, we have the ability to take in up to 40 volts of high level input. What this really equates to is about 400 watts, which means you can really work with just about any factory sound system out there. Even some of the highest tier, most premium factory sound systems usually don't get close to that 400 watt rating, because remember, that's per channel. There are a handful of them out there that get close or even exceed that 40 volts. But you also have to remember that that's playing a constant test tone, not music. So under normal circumstances, playing music, not a problem at all. These are going to work great. So what does that really mean to the end consumer? Or if you are someone working at a shop, you're in our industry watching this video today, what this really means to you is that you can use these products with any vehicle out there. There's really nothing on the road today that you can't use this with. Even if it's, maybe not the best possible solution for that vehicle, it wouldn't be because of its input capability. Same thing with the output. You can get up to 9.5 volts of output from a DQ61. So what does this all kind of boil down to? It boils down to that you could take the factory radio in a 20-year-old vehicle, keep it in the dash, but make it have the output capability of a modern $2,000 high-end touchscreen head unit from today. And actually even make it exceed those outputs with the high voltage RCA output. So there's a lot that you can do. I love building a great sounding system that has a head unit in the dash that just looks antiquated or looks like something that wouldn't perform. It's such a cool kind of sleeper system at that point. So what if you have, what if you like those feature sets, but you would rather use an aftermarket head unit? Maybe you already have an aftermarket head unit. That's where the DQ-DX comes into play. So the DQ-DX is really very similar to the DQ-61, but with this one, we have RCA inputs and RCA outputs. So if you were to ask me, hey, I already have an aftermarket single DIN or double DIN, but I bought a pretty inexpensive one. I bought a $200 double DIN, and I have a decent 5-channel amplifier. It's okay, and I replaced all my speakers, added a subwoofer, or whatever. But at the end of the day, maybe you're just not totally happy or satisfied with that system. Maybe it just seems like it's lacking that little something extra, or it's lacking that little bit of extra volume. The DQ-DX is a great piece to add to just about any aftermarket system, any standardized aftermarket system anyway, and get an immediate improvement in sound. Better just overall volume, less distortion, more tunability, more customizability, the signal delay. It's a really cool piece. Again, this is the piece where when I was in retail, I could drop in a DQ-DX to most any system that was already installed and drop it in pretty quickly and make an immediate improvement in sound quality and just overall impact in that system. Now, I briefly touched on the signal delay on the DQ-61 and how it didn't require software, didn't require a tape measure, just didn't require all those traditional things. No math, okay, because nobody wants to do any math. The signal delay on these products is very cool. It's essentially, there's a dial on the product where you flip it from setup to standby or to standard, basically. And when you flip it to setup, okay, that's going to be setup mode. And now you're going to take basically the bass knob, let's call it, dash control knob, whatever you want to call it. And when you're sitting in that driver's seat and you have this unit in setup mode, you want to play a song that you're familiar with, something that has strong vocals. I usually use something with very few instruments in it. And as you're sitting in that driver's seat, all you're going to do is turn the bass knob, and you just turn it slowly. And with each click or indent of that potentiometer, as you spin that knob, you're going to literally hear the artist's voice move from the front left corner of the vehicle. And with each click, that artist's voice is going to move to the middle of the windshield. And we're done. You click the knob once, you play something with some bass in it. And now when you turn the knob this time, with every turn of that ACR3, it's going to move the subwoofer from sounding like it's in the trunk to moving that woofer to sounding like it's up inside the front dash. It's the coolest, signal delay type correction that there is. And again, there's no software, no measuring, no math, none of that stuff. And it's a very convincing signal delay. Now, again, is it as good as doing all the math and being super hyper specific and OCD about your measurements and putting them into a, $2,000 DSP? No, it's not going to be exactly the same. It's not going to perform exactly like that. But remember, this product is also, fairly inexpensive and doesn't require all those things that sometimes are a hindrance for installers with DSP. In our industry, most of us accept that DSP is the way to go. Most of us accept that, to really build a quality system today, that system needs to include a DSP. But there are still lots of folks out there that are just not ready to take the plunge. They either don't like software or they're not familiar with computers. They don't like computers for whatever reason. And that's a pretty common thing I hear is like, hey, I keep hearing this buzzword DSP, and I understand, I think I want one, but man, I'm really not good with computers. I don't want to have to run software. And I get told all the time, I don't even have a computer. All I have is my smartphone. Now, granted, yes, you can still tune a lot of DSPs from a smartphone these days, but it's not ideal. So if you're somebody that's looking at DSP type features, but doesn't want software and all that, you could go to a DQ-DX or a DQ-61. They're a really, really cool piece. And again, these are going to give you separate front, rear, and sub EQ. The DQ-DX also has a crossover built in. It's a line driver. It's going to allow signal summing, independent input and output levels. There's a lot that you can do with these products. So really, really cool pieces, the DQ-DX and the DQ-61. Some of my favorites, they're like a sleeper product to me. They don't get quite the attention they should. So going into what I would call like a traditional DSP, we get into the DM-608. The DM-608 is our 6-channel in, 8-channel out standalone DSP. Now, when I say standalone, that's because these are just a DSP itself. There is no amplifier attached to this or anything else. It is just a DSP. The DM-608 is a great DSP for your everyday systems, okay? 6 channels of input, 8 channels of output gives you lots of flexibility, and it gives you enough to handle most systems out there. So with the DM-608, this is going to give you, like I mentioned, 6 channels of input, but you have 6 channels of high level and 6 channels of RCA input, 8 channels of low level output, so RCA out. And on those outputs, we're going to get up to 9.5 or 10 volts of output on those RCAs. So what does that really allow you to do? It allows you to keep the gains on your amplifiers at probably 0. And that way we're getting more output from the amps, less distortion, more clarity, more headroom, and just a better overall running system. Anytime we can keep the gains on our amps low means that we're going to also have less heat, less distortion, less wear and tear on the amplifier. It's not having to work as hard to achieve the same volume and the same end result. So if we can feed a hot, clean signal in, we're going to get a better result out. And that's one of the biggest differences usually between high quality audio gear and low quality gear is usually the ability to accept high voltage input signals and the ability to put out a high voltage signal on those RCAs. The DM-608 is one of the few products out there that we offer anyway that have a digital coax and optical input. So if you are doing some sort of preamp integration, maybe you're using the Pack Amp Pro or something along those lines where it's going to go in between your factory head unit and your factory amplified system, those preamp solutions like that usually have the ability to do an optical output, which is a great way to do it. It's super clean, gives you some of the best sound quality you're going to get out of a car. That coax digital input is also really cool. It's great for those consumers or end users that have a digital media player. You know, there's some very high-end, high-res media players out there today that have a digital coax output straight from the player. Think about that for a second. You could run that straight into your DSP and really eliminate the head unit altogether and have kind of a head unitless system, which is pretty slick. It also gives you the ability, though, that now that you have high level inputs, low level inputs, and these digital inputs, it allows you to mix those together. So maybe you are adding this DM-608 to a factory sound system and running aftermarket amplifiers, aftermarket speakers, but you're keeping that stock head unit in the dash for a myriad of reasons. So if that's the case, that's great. what you could do is actually bring in those high level signals to the speaker level inputs of the DM608, but then use that digital coax input maybe for your media player. And what it'll allow you to do is either switch between the DSP presets to select your source, or you could even blend them together if there was a reason for you to need to do that. With the DM608, much like the other products we talked about, this will take in up to 40 volts of high level input. Again, just means that there's really no vehicle out there you can't work on. This also has AccuBase built in. It is the only product, really, our DSPs in general are the only products where you can apply AccuBase to every channel of output. If you needed it for some reason, it's available. You can also plug in the ACR3 dash control. The ACR3 is our basically bass knob or dash control knob, whatever you'd like to call it. And what's cool is that you can assign it to do different things. It can be a master volume control, it can be just a subwoofer control, or it can be both if you want to set it up that way through the DSP presets. That's really what the presets are all about. On the DM platform, we also have the DM810. The DM810 is kind of the big brother to the 608. So as the name suggests, as you may be guessing, yes, it is 8 channels of input, 10 channels of output. It is our most popular DSP. For not a whole lot more money and not a whole lot more physical size real estate you're taking up in the vehicle, the DM810 is an awesome bang for the buck. 8 channels of input, 10 channels of output, has those digital coax and optical ins, has that high voltage high level signal input, high voltage RCA outputs that are selectable, by the way. So you've got some really cool stuff there that you can do. Of course, signal summing, you've got equalization, crossovers, all the filtering you could want to do. And I'll show you that when we dig into the software here in a moment. But it's just important to understand kind of, the different features and things like that that are available. One of the things that's on the DM810 and the DM608 that's a little bit different than some of our other products too, is the availability to use what's called the option port. And we'll dig into that here after the amplifiers. And I just want to kind of show you guys a little bit about how we use that and why. So one of the most popular categories today, though, is DSP integrated. So DSP integrated amplifiers, much like the ones you're seeing on your screen now. So in the integrated amp DSP series from Audiocontrol, we call it our D series. The D series amplifiers, there's 3 models. There's a D4.800, a D-5.1300, that's the newest one, and the D-6.1200, which is a really popular amplifier for us. Lots of power, great processing, all in one footprint, and designed and tested and assembled here in the US. They're an awesome product. They sound great. And from an installer's perspective, it's one less thing to find a place for, right? Now you don't have to find a place for a DSP under one seat and an amp under the other or whatever. It's all in one chassis. And as far as running wire and stuff too, it's nice to not have to run RCA cables necessarily. It's nice to not have to run power and ground primary wire to 2 different locations. Like there's definitely some great benefits to having an integrated amplifier like this. Just to be totally clear on the D series of amplifiers, I mentioned earlier that the DM608 and DM810 have digital coax and optical inputs. The amplifiers do not have digital inputs on them. So there is a extra port on them called the option port that we're going to talk about in just a moment. But as far as built onto the chassis, there's just not the physical real estate on that amplifier to have an optical in. And I've got one here I'm going to show in just a moment, and you'll see more of what I'm talking about. So with the D series amps, there's a lot of power on tap. If you look at those specs on your screen right now, you're getting a bare minimum of 100 watts RMS per channel at 4 ohms. At 2 ohms, we have 200 RMS per channel to run your mids and highs. That's crazy, right? Especially if you talk to people in other industries, people in the home audio industry, people in the pro audio industry, DJ and stage type work, pro sound, live sound, that sort of thing. They use 200 watts to run like big, massive subwoofers that fill a large space with bass output. Here we are in car audio using 200 watts RMS to run a 3-inch mid range. So it's practically ludicrous amounts of power, but it's also really, really clean power. I didn't get super technical and dive into all the little specs on these things, but all I can say is if you get a chance, go test drive one, go listen to one of these things. They are a very sweet sounding amplifier. They sound great, whether you're into whatever you're into, whether it's volume or sound quality or whatever your system's about, whatever your type of music genre or your style is. These are just great sounding amplifiers. They have the power on tap to get loud when you need to, but they also are just very precise, very accurate sounding amps that just, they just sing when they're paired up with some good speakers. So I can't say enough good things there. That D5.1300 is particularly a sweet spot for me. I think it's, you know, potentially one of the best 5 channels out there as far as being able to just build a killer sounding, you know, I don't want to say basic, but kind of everyday system, you know, components in the front, coaxes in the back, and 1 or 2 subs. Pretty average stuff that a lot of shops are doing out there. That D5 kills it in that space as far as being able to make a system based off of one black box hidden under a seat or something that just absolutely rocks. That D5 is a no-brainer. Not only that, you know, for those that don't understand our amplifiers and some of what we do as audio control, with most vehicles out there, if you needed to do OEM integration, so you need to keep the factory head unit, and now you want to do a DSP and an amplifier, in a lot of brands' products, that would mean a OEM integration piece, some sort of product to do that, a DSP, some sort of DSP standalone, and a separate amplifier or multiple amplifiers. With audio control, you can buy one product that literally does all of that. Let's take the D6.1200, for example. So that's a 6-channel amplifier with a DSP built in, and it has OEM integration built in. So with the D612, let's get specific, that is a 6-channel power amp. It has 6 powered channel outputs, okay? So you have built-in power for 6, but you also have 8 channels of high-level input. So that means that we can grab the signal from the, let's say, top dash of the front of a vehicle, the front doors of the front of a vehicle, the rear doors from a vehicle, the factory sub, maybe the factory center channel, you know, whatever it is that you have going on. You could bring in any or all of those and sum them together inside that amplifier to get back to full range or to achieve whatever it is you're trying to get to, flattened signal or whatever it is that you want. So there's some just amazing things that you can do with those amps. They're so versatile. And the 6-channel in particular, the 6-channel is a home run if you're trying to do active 3-way components. So if you're going to do, you know, one pair of channels for the tweeters, one pair of channels for the front 3s, another pair of channels for the 6s and the doors or what have you, it's just the perfect amplifier for that setup. One little thing that I didn't talk a whole lot about too on those amplifiers, we'll bring up here in a moment, is that they have some unamplified outputs as well. So there's some really cool stuff there, you know, that we'll dig into. So the other thing that we're going to talk about today a little bit is the DM Smart DSP update. Now, we've been talking about this for a little while. We've been kind of being kind of cheeky about it and just, you know, kind of showing little hints of it here and there. You know, we showed it to a couple of people at at Knowledge Fest Orlando. We didn't really make a big deal about it or anything. We just kind of had a little demo of it set up off to the side if anybody was savvy enough to come up and check on it and see what that was all about. So there's some cool stuff happening there, and I'm going to give you guys a cool demonstration of that. With the amplifiers, though, before we get into that software, my main point of bringing that up, let me back up there for a second, is that DM Smart DSP app is the same app for all of our DSP-based products. So whether it is the DM608, the DM810, the D4.800 amp, the D5.1300 amplifier, or the D6.1200 amplifier, it's all the same application. One other cool point on that is that it does run on all the popular platforms. So if you're like me and you're an Apple user, you run a Mac, a MacBook Air or MacBook Pro or iMac or whatever, it will run on your Mac just fine. It runs beautifully on there, and you get all the same features as everybody else. It'll also run on a PC. It runs on a Apple iPad. It runs on a Android tablet. It'll run on a iPhone. It'll also run on a Android smartphone. So it runs on all the popular platforms. And what I really, really like is, from somebody that was in retail for 15 years and dealt with lots of DSP softwares out there, something that I really loved on the audio control software was A, it's easy, and I'm going to show you just how easy here in a moment. But B, it runs on all the platforms and you get the same features. It really bothers me when, hey, just because I'm using a tablet, I only get 70% of the features running someone else's software. With audio control, whether you're running it on a smartphone or running it on a high-powered desktop PC, it doesn't matter. You're going to get the same features. Now, to be clear, I would never recommend setting up a DSP on a smartphone. That screen, no matter how big your smartphone is not big enough to really do it well. And if you have big hands like me, it's kind of hard to hit all the little things with your finger. Even using a stylus, it's still a challenge, okay? I highly recommend using a desktop or a laptop computer. It's just a much better experience. On the speaking of experience, on the Audiocontrol DSP products, whether it's a DM608, a 810, or the DSP amplifiers, the D series amps, they all feature something we call the option port, and you're seeing that on your screen right now. The option port is a really cool feature. It gives us the ability to develop some cool things here going into the future that I'm not going to talk about today, that are going to open up a world of possibilities going forward. But right now, what we use the option port for is our ACBT24. The ACBT24 is our dual Bluetooth receiver. So it's about the size of not even a matchbook, and it plugs straight into that option port. And when that's docked in there, it does two things. It gives you the ability to run Smart DSP software from your tablet or smartphone. Okay. If you're using a laptop, you're going to use the USB port. Also on that photo, you'll see there's a micro USB port right next to that option port. That's where you're going to plug in if you're using a computer. So to clarify, if you're using a Mac or PC, desktop, laptop, doesn't matter, you're going to use USB. No doubt about it. If you're using a mobile device, like a smartphone or a tablet, you are going to use Bluetooth. There is no cross-pollination there. You're going to use the right platform for your device, basically. Also, with that Bluetooth device, though, the ACBT24, what makes it unique is that it's a dual Bluetooth chip. And what I mean by that is within the BT24, there are actually two Bluetooth chipsets. One is for app control. That's what allows what I just talked about, the Smart DSP app, to run on your mobile device. The other side of that is that there is a Bluetooth streamer built in there. So now this DSP amplifier or DSP processor has Bluetooth audio built inside, or built into the BT24, docked into it, let's call it. So now if you're working on a vehicle, maybe it's a slightly older car, maybe it has Bluetooth for phone calls, but it doesn't have Bluetooth audio. Just by plugging this little module into the amplifier that you've already installed, you've now enabled Bluetooth audio in this car, given this vehicle kind of a new lease on life as far as sound systems are concerned. And what's cool is it's not just regular Bluetooth, it's actually high resolution Bluetooth streaming. So it has aptX HD. If you're an Android user and your phone is aptX compatible, you are going to get the highest quality Bluetooth stream right into that amplifier. And it's going to be the best possible wireless Bluetooth sound you could ask for. As I mentioned, in the future, we have some other really cool plans for the option port, but that's not what we're diving into today. So let's go a little further here. And as far as these DSP amplifiers are concerned, let's talk about one of kind of the favorite little secret features that's on these DSP amps. And, I call it the secret sauce sometimes, like what makes them special. This is one of my favorite features. We have a 4, 5, and 6 channel DSP amplifier, but what if you need 8 channels? What if you need 5 channels and you bought the 4-channel amp? Whatever your system design is, how do you accomplish that if the amps are only 4, 5, and 6 channels? Well, here's how you do it. So let's say we're looking at our D6.1200. That's what's on your screen right now. That amplifier, you'll notice, as I mentioned, has lots of high-level inputs, lots of RCA inputs. You can do factory or aftermarket, doesn't matter. But what's cool is when you look at the RCAs, you'll notice that there's actually 2 extras. I circled them in red for you. With those extra RCAs, those are not an input, those are an output, and they're not a pass-through. I think we've all seen car audio amplifiers that have a pass-through, and they're just taking whatever signal comes in and dumping it back out so that you could easily add an additional amplifier. The problem with that is that those 2 amps are now going to do the exact same thing. Whatever that first amp is doing, if it's getting a sub signal sent to it, well, the amplifier down the road is also going to be a sub amp now because that's the signal it's getting. With this, those 2 RCA outputs are DSP RCA outputs. So now you have the ability to DSP not only the 6 channels that are inside this amplifier, you also have the ability, though, to DSP an additional external amp. So if you buy the D612 to start with, you get that in your car. Let's say you're going to use it to run the front speakers, the rear speakers, and maybe you're going to bridge channels 5 and 6 to a small subwoofer. And then down the road, you go, okay, I'm ready for an upgrade. I want to buy a standalone sub amplifier. So I buy the Audiocontrol LC-1500, let's just say. Well, when I add that LC-1500, all I have to do is take the RCA out from that D61200, feed it into my LC-1500 sub amp, and now I can actually DSP the subwoofer amplifier in that same piece of software. You don't have to run 2 pieces of software. You don't have to buy a DSP subwoofer amplifier because your first amp is DSPing your second amp. It's the coolest feature out there. I love the way that that works for system building. I'm a big fan of, whenever we build product or look at DSPs in particular, I'm a big fan of building systems that are upgradable. I feel like a lot of consumers end up getting bit by the car audio bug, which is great, but we need to give people the availability to upgrade. We all get bitten by the upgrade bug sometimes, where you just want more. You want more volume, you want more speakers, you want more channels, you want more clarity, whatever it is, right? And those two RCA outputs are kind of the key to being able to still do that. Hey, you could even feed signal, from that into another DSP and expand your channels even further, or whatever it is that you wanted to do. So there's a lot of really cool things that you can do with that. And just remember, that's not a pass-through. That will be a DSP controllable output. Even if you're doing signal summing and OEM integration inside this amplifier, that output will be the sum of all of that summing and integration you've done. So what a cool way to do it. With that, I want to talk a little bit about some of the software. We've been doing the DSP, DM Smart DSP software since the beginning. We launched the DM608 and the D4.800 amplifiers maybe about 7 years ago, right around there. And so we've been doing this for a while. What's really cool to me is that even a customer that bought a first generation D4.800 6 or 7 years ago is about to get a major upgrade to their system just for being an audio control customer. We don't charge for these software updates. We don't charge for firmware. We don't charge for any of that stuff, but we continually evolve that software and firmware to give the customer the best possible experience, to give the technician the best possible chance of making this car sound good and allowing them to be successful with this installation. And, we've done a lot of software revisions over time. Our software continues to get better and better. And when I give you the live demo here in a moment, you'll see what I mean. But we're going to add some really cool new features that everybody's been asking for, essentially, is what we've done here. So we do listen. We listen to the feedback that we get at shows like Knowledge Fest or Master Tech Expo, SEMA, shows like that. We listen to what we hear out there when we're doing those shows. And we take that knowledge back and talk to engineering and talk to product development and say, hey, look, we really need to have X, Y, and Z, and here's why. And they get to work on trying to implement that stuff into the software. So here's just a good example for you when you're looking at that input view. Those of you that are already familiar with our software, you are probably going to spy the difference right away. But when you're looking at that input view, you're going to notice that off to kind of the right-hand side there, we have gotten rid of the input time correction because it's just really something that 99% of people never used. Most wouldn't even know how to use it, even if they needed to. So instead, we added 2 all-pass filters. And those all-pass filters are able to be first-order, second-order filters, and you have some availability there to customize those and do a lot with that, right? So whether it's that we're targeting a factory all-pass filter that we need to combat, or that we're doing it for tuning reasons, there's lots of different reasons to use all-pass filters. I don't claim to be the all-pass filter master by any means, but I do know, they're definitely something that a lot of you are going to need, and it's great that we're going to have those built in, and those are obviously customizable there. One of the other things on the software there is in the output view, we've customized things and added some new crossover features. Again, there's lots of folks that were asking for more options on the crossover, so we made sure to build those in. And on the EQ section as well, we have been getting asked for not just graphic, but parametric EQ for some time now. Lots of kind of pro enthusiasts or prosumers that are, maybe better educated in this world, in this audio world than your average just person that listens to their car stereo, are looking for more tuning ability. Graphic EQ, you can do a lot with graphic EQ. You can make a car sound fantastic with a graphic EQ. But if you want to take it that extra step further and really target a specific area of the, frequency response, and you need to get hyper specific, parametric EQ is the way to do that. And I'll show you exactly how we do that in the software in a moment, but that is something we've added. The other side of that is our dashboard view. We did modify our dashboard view a little bit just to open up some of the resources that we needed to add some of these other features in there. So there's a lot going on there. And then real quick, before we get into the software, I did just want to mention kind of the DM-RTA. It's not really a DSP, but it is a signal analyzer, not so much a processor. But I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the DM-RTA during a DSP class session or course, right? So the DM-RTA, for those of you that are not familiar with it, it's pretty much, it's our version of what we think is the modern tech's ultimate test tool for audio. It's really meant to be like an OEM integration tool. It's used for tuning vehicles a lot as well. It's great for that too, but it's really meant to be an OEM integration tool. That's really where this thing shines. I hear every day calls come into tech support or come into me myself that are folks that are struggling to get a system sound right. And a lot of times it's struggling to sound the way they think it should because they don't know what they're working with for signal. Now, if you are diving into a system that you've never touched before, never played with, it's a car that you're not familiar with, it's a car that's maybe new or whatever the case may be, it's hard to know sometimes, are those front speakers actually full range? Is the signal going to those rear door or rear deck speakers full range? Can I use that as my signal for this subwoofer that I'm installing or for this DSP I'm installing? And how are you really supposed to know unless you actually test that stuff? So we do whole classes and trainings on DSP and DM-RTA all the time. But DM-RTA is definitely one that gets a lot of focus, and it needs it because there are still a lot of guys out there that are just unfortunately kind of guessing, and if you're not testing, you are guessing. A lot of people don't like to hear that, but that's the truth. So anyway, DM-RTA comes in a couple of different variations. What I'm showing you on the screen there is the DM-RTA Pro Kit. The Pro Kit is the best way to buy the DM-RTA because it's going to be that nice blue kind of Pelican case style box. It comes with the DM-RTA tool itself, all the test leads, all of the microphone, the Bluetooth adapter, all of the stuff that you would probably want with your DM-RTA is all built in and all contained in that one kit. We even give you different chargers for it, all sorts of cool things. So, we could do a whole session on just the DM-RTA. That's not what this is about today, but that's really what we're kind of putting out there in the world as, hey, let us help you with these installs. The DM-RTA is probably your best friend when it comes to integration, because not only is it an RTA, as the name suggests, but it's also an oscilloscope. It's also a voltmeter, a polarity checker, an SPL meter. There's a lot that you can do with this piece. And actually not just in the mobile audio car world. You have lots of guys out there using it in the custom install home audio, home theater, and pro sound world as well. So lots of cool features built into that. Like I said, it's not about DM-RTA today, but I definitely would be remiss if I didn't chat about DM-RTA at least for a minute. So with that, I think we're ready to get into the software itself and kind of dive in there. So I'll stop screen sharing here and we'll move on to the software. All right. All right, cool. So with our Smart DSP software, there is a lot of cool things that we can do with this. Before I actually dive into that software, though, I should probably show you what it is that we're working with today. So for this presentation and for this kind of training here, what I'm going to use today to show you this software on is the D4.800. I actually have a D4800 on my desk here today in my hands. So this is our D-Series 4-channel amplifier. I showed you guys earlier in the presentation what this looked like, but you can see, physically speaking, this is not a huge amplifier. There is also a nice cover plate that covers up all the lights and everything on this, but you'll notice there is no, of course, controls, no dials, no knobs, no switches. Everything is going to be done, of course, through that software. And then on our end here, you can see, get this position so you guys can see it a little bit. You've got your input section over here with your outputs for speaker, your input for the ACR3, the dash control, USB cable, option port, and then down below is your 6 high-level inputs. That's right, 6 high-level on a 4-channel amplifier, and that's so that we can do things like signal summing, OEM integration, all that good stuff. Even in the 4-channel version, you basically have, if you're familiar with it, like an LC7i built inside. But it's better than that because you also have DSP. So think of it almost like there's a DM608 crammed inside this 800-watt 4-channel amplifier. It's a lot to fit in a small package. And then I had mentioned earlier too, those RCA outs, right? So you have your RCA inputs here. This last one, though, is an RCA output. So that's where we could run that out to a maybe a subwoofer amplifier or an additional 2-channel amp or something like that, and be able to really build a whole system just based off of that one small chassis doing everything. So there's a ton that we can do there. So let me bring up my other screen here, and I'll give you guys a tour of the DM Smart DSP software, the changes that have come to that, and just kind of the basics of how we set that up. So when we first look at Smart DSP software, one of the first things you'll probably notice is up at the top, it does identify which product it is. So I mentioned earlier, this software works the same based on, doesn't matter which product it is that you have, doesn't matter whether you're using a Mac or a PC, it's going to look approximately the same. And the cool thing on this is that as soon as it gets plugged into the product, it will auto recognize which product it is. So in this case, as I just showed you, I'm using the D4.800. So up at the top of the screen there, it shows D4.800 that we're connected. And it's already configured all of the options on the screen for me based on which product it is. I don't have to go through and tell it how many channels I have and all that sort of thing. It's going to do that automatically just based on recognizing that. So in this software, one of the things that I love being able to do is name channels. So with this piece, you'll notice up here, we have our inputs. We are in the input view. We have front, rear, and front high. So front high is what we call those extra inputs, right? If this was a traditional 4-channel amplifier, you have the front 2 channels and the rear 2 channels, and that's it. With this, we have the front input, the rear input, and the front high. So front high input is what I would normally use to bring in maybe the top dash speakers in a factory sound system. We would grab the signal from those, bring those into the amplifier for input signal, and now we can take a look at that signal and decide whether we need to mix it, sum it, process it and use it, or whatever it is that we're going to do. So in this initial input view, one of the really cool things that's in our amplifiers is a built-in RTA. Now, this is different from your acoustic RTA where you're using a microphone. This is an electrical RTA, which is arguably more important. We need to see what's going on with that factory signal, right? I need to be able to see what's happening with that and see if the channels that I've grabbed for my signal are going to be usable, see if they're valuable, see if there's something that I can even use to do the job. If I'm putting in a subwoofer amplifier, I'm going to need to make sure that there's bass in this signal path. If I'm putting in a full range system, I need to make sure that there is, signal across this whole signal spectrum here in the RTA. So what I would be doing, let me just grab some signal here. I can show you guys kind of what this looks like. Get this going. There we go. There we go. So let's say that this is the signal that we saw when we're tying into a factory radio. You'll notice that the left side of the screen has significantly less output, or we're getting significantly less input. So if this is what I was seeing on the screen, I would know right away, okay, if I'm playing pink noise right now through this system, and this is what I see, I know that yes, it is technically full range, but there is some sort of either crossover or factory EQ that's been applied. If I grab this same system and take a look at it and go, this seems awfully bass heavy. If I grab this same setup and I see a signal that looks more like this, maybe I've grabbed a signal that was fed to a mid-bass woofer or a factory subwoofer or something like that. And so if this is the only signal I have to work with, that's okay. I can kind of compensate for this and level it out using my DSP, but it's good to know what you're working with to begin with. And if you're using a DSP that doesn't have a built-in RTA, how do you really know where to start making adjustments? How do you know where to start making changes? You could use a microphone in the vehicle and make those changes based off of the acoustic measurements in the vehicle. But what about being able to just start with a flat, clean signal? That's really where this comes into play. So let's just say that I grab my signal and it looks something like this. Hey, great. This is flat. My signal's clean. This is something I could literally use to do any system I want. If this is what the signal looks like when I tap into those front door speakers. This is something I could use to do a full range system, a multi-channel system, a subwoofer, whatever it is. I've got enough signal here to do it. Your frequencies are labeled down at the bottom, from 25 up to 20K. Your amplitude is up on the left-hand side from plus 12 to negative 12 dB, and you can see exactly what's going on with that signal. Now, as I come in here, my RTA signal strength basically is right here, or my resolution, I guess you could call it. My sensitivity is really the right word. So if I look at my RTA and it looks something like this, where I really don't see anything happening, and down at the bottom of the screen, you just barely see little bubbling of sound. If you do that, you'll want to increase the sensitivity on the RTA until it is all the way across the screen and approximately at that blue line in the middle. It's really about where you want it. Again, we have FM and S. This is fast, medium, and slow. So this is going to change the response speed of that RTA. So I'm going to want it to be, most of the time you're going to leave on fast or medium. Slow works well, though, if you're trying to pinpoint something that's a little too sporadic. If you're trying to see like a door chime or something like that, if you were to open the door and there was a chime coming through that door speaker, and you had tapped into that signal, you would definitely see that if this is on fast. If it's on slow, though, it may not be quick enough to actually pick up that rise and fall. So make sure that you're kind of aware of that. Now, the part of this screen that's new for those of you that are already familiar with DM Smart DSP is the all pass filter section. So you'll notice here that we have all pass number 1, all pass number 2. You can organize them as a first or second order, and then you have your frequency and your Q variable there. So you can set that up. So if I just click on first order, then I can either change my frequency by sliding this little slider here, or I can also just type in this space. So if I just type 1000, there you go. It's a 1 kilohertz all pass. And then I can, if I click second order, I can go in here and modify the Q as well. If I click it again, that's going to you'll see how those kind of turn to gray. That'll turn that off. And then you have another one on this side, all pass number 2, same thing. You either can just modify frequency, or if you put it as a second order, you have both frequency and your Q. Moving on to the output view, this is where some other things have changed for us, which is pretty exciting. In this view, I have my summing ability, I have my output levels, I have my signal delay, I have all of that good stuff in here, as well as my EQ down at the bottom. So let's start up here at the top. Let's chat about what's new. Again, this is really kind of talking about the new features that are coming out. So in our crossover in the past, we have just had a 12 or 24 dB per octave Linkwitz-Riley crossover. Now you have a little more flexibility. Now you're going to have a 18 dB, which would be a Butterworth, and you can do one or the other. So you don't have to run Butterworth both top and bottom. You could run a 24 dB on the top side and 18 dB on the bottom side if that's what you're looking for. But we've given you an extra option. We added 18 dB as a potential option. But one of the other things that we have heard in the past has kind of tripped some people up is when you're sliding this slider for the crossover to the frequency that you desire, it trips some people up that it doesn't go to where they think it should. So you'll notice when I turn that all the way down, it says bypass. It used to just go down to 25 and stop. And the concern from some consumers was, well, does that mean I'm rolling off everything from 25 dB and down at 12 dB? Is that what you're really doing? And, yes, technically we're rolling off 12 dB down past 25 hertz. So we've been hearing from some consumers and some pros out there that they would rather not roll off anything on the bottom. So we do give you the ability, if you bring this all the way down, to just bypass the crossover point on the bottom side. Otherwise, you can set that crossover, if you're very gentle, you can bring this up and start at about 20 hertz and bring it up from there. So let's say I needed a high pass crossover. All I've got to do is drag this to where I want it. Say I want a, 2.2 kilohertz and up, or 2200 hertz and up crossover. There you go. I've now got an 18 dB Butterworth crossover at 2.2 on the top. On the top, you'll see bypass to just 20K. And again, for those of you running like a high system where the response is expected up to 30, 35, 40K, there was some concern that we may be limiting that top end. So we've made sure that now you can actually bypass the crossover altogether if that's what you want. So if you want a high pass crossover at 2.2 but want it to go to sky's the limit, basically, you can certainly do that now. You were not able to do that in the past. So some pretty cool things there that we have changed, again, just according to basically consumer demand. So you can also set up really easily a bandpass filter. So let's say you wanted a 264.9 to a 6.4 kilohertz crossover. You could absolutely set that up. It is now a 12 dB per octave link with Riley on the top and the bottom of that. You can configure this however you want. So some really cool options there. Makes the crossover section definitely more versatile, just a lot more options there. Now we still have our signal delay built in just like we used to. Now in the DSP, yes, the signal delay does require some measurements. So you are going to want to measure from each driver. You know, I did the tip of my nose method. Some people do to the middle of the headrest, to each their own, or to their ear. But yes, you will enter those measurements here. So let's say we put in, 36.2, whatever, it will add that delay to the system. You also have your Accubase section right down below. You can add Accubase to any channel, which is really pretty cool. And up above this, before we get into the bottom here, you also have your output level for each of these channels. And one of my favorite features is the really, really easy signal summing. We have had so many people get confused with signal summing because it's just so easy to do. So I'll give you an example. Let's jump back to our input view for a moment. And let's say that our front input is the front doors. So what's nice is that you can name all of these inputs and outputs. So I'm going to say front door there. My rear doors are going to be my rear inputs. Okay, so that means I just grabbed my signal from the rear doors for the rear. And my front high is just going to be the top dash. So let's say I had some factory tweeters up there. I'm going to grab signal from those as well. All right. And then what's nice is that you can click on each of those inputs and actually see what's going on that input. So we've now saved those names in there. I highly recommend naming all of your inputs. It makes it so much easier when you go to make changes or troubleshoot later on down the road. Same thing with your outputs. Definitely name your outputs, guys, for sure. So in this input view, you have independent input level. You see as I drag that up or down, I can attenuate or amplify that input. I'm usually going to start with it at usually around 0 anyway. There's also a little clipping indicator there for you, and you can mute inputs really easily just for troubleshooting and testing. So then you'd be able to do the same. I only have 2 channels of input here for this demonstration, but if we went over to the rear doors input, I would be able to see that signal coming in on those rear doors and know exactly what's going on with those. And same thing with that front high or whatever signal we're bringing in there. So let's jump back to our fronts. We've got signal. On my output view, what I was getting at is the summing portion of it. So here I have front, rear, and front high. All you're doing is choosing where you want your signal to come from. So if I'm saying, hey, for outputs 1 and 2, I want my signal to come from the front doors, then all I have to do is make sure that just front is lit up. That's it. If I wanted to grab a signal from front and front high and mix them together, summing, all I've got to do is click front high. Now I'm summing front high and front together for output 1 and 2. That's all there is to it. It's really pretty simple. Now I did mention on the outputs, you could name those as well. So if I click right there in 1 and 2, let's just say this is going to be my new front components, if I can type today. And on my outputs 3 and 4, we can name those as well. We could name them, whatever, rear, coaxes, just say coax, and let's say my line out is going to be to my sub amp. All right, so now I have named all my outputs. I've got everything good to go. And again, I highly recommend naming those. It's going to make life so much easier if you get back in here later on down the road. So for my front components, let's just say that there was only mid-range on channels, on the front door channels, and there was only highs on the top dash. So I would need to do signal summing at that point. If I'm doing signal summing, I just want to make sure that front and front high are both lit up, which they are right now. And that's pretty much all there is to it for the summing portion of it. I have my output right here built in. All I have to do is slide this a little bit. So let's just say, for a baseline, I'm going to start things at -9 dB or something along those lines. I can drag that there and leave it. Now there's also these controls right here, which is your remote level. This makes for a really simple setup. If you put in a dash control knob, the ACR3, and you say, hey, I want this knob to be master volume. All you've got to do is click this little box and make it light up. And now this is your master volume. Any output channels that have the word level lit up will be controlled by that dash control knob or bass knob. If I wanted to just control that subwoofer output that I'm going to hook up to my external sub amp, which is my line out, I would just go into line out, click level, and now my dash controller is just going to control the output of the external sub amp. It's really that simple. It's super, super easy. So if I go back into front components, you can see I can also set these as mono. I can flip them out of phase 180 degrees, or I can link them to the other channels. If I hit link, all it's going to do, guys, is just copy the settings from one over to the other and set them up to all do the same thing. So let's say you were going to use all 4 channels of this D4800 to just drive 6.5-inch coaxials, 1 per channel. It would be really easy to just say link 3-4, and now the whole amplifier is going to play kind of like a big 2 channel, so to speak. Also in here is your arguably one of the more important parts, the EQ. Now, one of the things I love about our EQ is, as you're seeing right now, our RTA overlaps the EQ. So remember, when we were in input view, we were seeing the signal coming in. Now let's go to our output view. If I make changes in, say, my crossover, let's say that these front components, I'm going to high pass them at 80 Hertz. So I'm going to click in this box. I'm going to click 80. Okay, these components are now going to play from 80 Hertz on up. Now, if I go down here to my EQ, you'll see I have a crossed over signal. You'll see that below 80 Hertz is significantly reduced. And it's really kind of fun because you can even see the difference between, say, a 12 dB crossover, which is this. Here, I'm going to put this on slow so that you can see it a little bit easier. Okay, so there's slow. So right now we have an 80 Hertz, 12 dB per octave crossover. Let's see when I switch to a 24 dB, what that looks like, right? So it dropped a little bit. It's a little bit steeper, so to speak. If I go to 18 dB Butterworth, again, same idea. We're still keeping that same frequency. We're just changing our crossover type, okay, or our steepness of the slope. So let's go into my rear speakers here, my rear coax. I'm going to click on those. And let's say these are going to be just like rear fill. Maybe I don't want them to play full range. So I'm going to cross these over from 90 to, let's say 90 to like 2K or something like that, just for the heck of it. So there's 90 to 2K. I'm going to do a, sure, I'll do a 12 dB Linkwitz Riley, and I'll do that on the top and bottom. So now when I go down to my signal here, oh, I have no signal because I have the rear input selected and I only have input on front. So let's go back down here. There we go. Bring up the sensitivity a little bit, or decrease sensitivity so I can see it a little better. So now you can see what those rear speakers would be playing. What's on your screen right now is all those rear speakers would be playing is just kind of that mid-range section. And maybe that's what you want for your rear fill. Okay, great. Well, there you go. That was pretty easy to set up though, right? So one of my favorite things, like I mentioned a minute ago on this, is the ability to see the signal using the RTA. And the even cooler part is being able to visualize your equalizer changes. So right now we are down at the EQ. I have a 30-band graphic EQ turned on right now. If I want to go to a 14-band, you can see it just changed those 30 down to 14. Obviously, more of those are centered down in the bass portion of the signal. So 14 band is kind of designed for, you guessed it, a subwoofer or a mid-bass driver. If I go to PEQ, this is what's new. This is the parametric EQ that's been added. Now, again, this is a feature that a lot of folks are asking for. How do I get parametric? When are you guys going to have parametric? So we understand lots of folks want it. Parametric is, again, a bit of a buzzword right now in DSP and car audio. I'm not saying it's a fad or anything. I'm just saying that, you can still make a car sound great with graphic. But if you wanted parametric EQ and that was holding you back in the past from going audio control, don't let it hold you back because you are going to get it. So now what's really cool is instead of this this band being stuck at this frequency, I can literally just drag this. So if I want a, whatever, okay, now I have an 81 Hertz band right there. And here, we'll put it back down over here. Maybe. So drag that. I can make my changes right there, and I can adjust the Q by just dragging these little red dots. So if I want it wider or narrower, there we go. So there's a pretty narrow Q. Now you can also drag this little slider in order to give you that ability. So you can see as I drag that, you can see how narrow that got while making changes. So it's pretty slick. The bypass button also allows you to just bypass your EQ completely momentarily so that you can hear the differences. With the EQ, the other thing we get asked a lot is, can I EQ channel 1 and channel 2 separately? Or can I EQ any two channels separately? Or do I have to do them together? And you can absolutely do them separately. There's lots of guys that don't know how to do this. Right here where it shows 1, 1-2, and the number 2, that's how you do it. So when it shows 1-2, that's EQing those two channels together. If I click just number 1, now I'm only EQing channel 1. And now if I click number 2, I'm only EQing number 2. You'll see that there's a difference there. So let's say on number 2, I want to drag that down there. I jump back to channel 1. You can see my difference between the two. Okay, so you've got some options there in how you set this up. So you can either have a 10-band parametric, a 14-band graphic, or a 30-band graphic on your audio-controlled DSP products here going forward. Now, if I mess this all up and I go in here and go, wow, okay, I made all these changes. Here, let's tweak this thing a little bit and do some really high quality tuning here. So, okay, let's go here and tune this. Okay, so I've got my tune in there. I listen to it. I go, wow, this sounds absolutely terrible. I don't know what I'm doing. I can hit flat and hit yes, and it will put it all back to totally flat, so I can just start over, which is a pretty useful feature most of the time. One other thing that's in this that is really kind of neat that a lot of folks may not know is the RTA memories. If you're not really sure what you should be shooting for here with the EQ, you're like, hey, I know I'm supposed to tune this thing, but what am I really gunning for? Like, what's my target? If you go to Audio Control House Curve, it'll actually kind of ghost that curve into the background and give you kind of something to shoot for. If you don't know what you think a good sounding EQ would look like, that house curve is basically what we think most vehicles sound good if they're tuned to. So it's meant just to be kind of a basic guide for those that don't have their own method or don't know. So the other thing you can do in RTA memories is basically take screenshots more or less, or store things in there. So if I click store number 1, and then hit yes, it just saved kind of like a snapshot of this RTA readout in its memory. So I'm going to go to RTA memories again, and this time instead of hitting store 1, I'm going to hit recall 1. And then if I, let's say I'm just going to turn up my, or turn down my sensitivity so you can see it. But you can see in the background there, it kind of ghosted that in. That is your RTA memory right there. We just ghosted in that original RTA so that you can then do kind of an A/B comparison or see where you need to make changes sometimes. It's very, very helpful. Now I can also go in here and just say deselect or average all or clear all, that sort of thing. So I just say deselect and bring up my sensitivity again. Excuse me. So then moving on a little bit here, let's get to the dashboard view. So dashboard view is a really cool feature. It basically gives you just an overview of everything that you're working on all at the same time. So rather than clicking on input view, analyzing input, then going to output view, analyzing output, so on and so forth. On here, when you're in dashboard view, you have the availability to click on basically whatever it is that you want. So if you want to click on inputs and a different set of outputs at the same time, you can do that. And that way you can make changes kind of all in one space. I would say for the average person, they're going to spend most of their time in input and output view. But once a tech gets really proficient at this software and really knows what they're doing, starts doing a lot of them, dashboard view becomes your best friend, because you can get in there quickly, make a couple changes, hear the results, see the results, and then get out of there and get on to the next vehicle. So when you look at this dashboard view, you'll notice that all of the features and everything are pretty much the same here, guys. It's just a consolidated view, and just gives you kind of a snapshot of what you're seeing all at once. And then if you did need to make a change as you're looking at this, you're like, oh man, I should have toned down the certain frequency or whatever. You could just click on the EQ anywhere. It brings up this nice expanded version of it. It's almost full screen. And then we can go in here and make changes. So I can go into this EQ, drag this down. Okay, change the Q. Let's drag it down even farther. And then we're going to make a different change up here. We're going to bring this up and sure. Yep, that's exactly what I was looking for. And then just click out of that, and what do you know? It's saved in there for us. So we have some really cool stuff in that dashboard view. And what's nice is you saw that I just boosted right around 4K on the EQ, but then look at the output RTA. You can see in real time the differences that your EQ adjustments are making in the sound. Now, of course, you should be able to hear those differences too, but seeing it on an RTA just kind of confirms that what you're doing is actually taking effect, even if you can't hear it. Because let's face it, there are going to be times that you make adjustments in an EQ, but you don't hear any difference in the actual vehicle. Well, this RTA can actually help you to verify that you did make a difference or make a change, but maybe it's just not making an acoustic difference in the vehicle or an audible difference. So the other thing I'll mention in dashboard view that is very important is the ability to do DSP presets. Remember, I mentioned earlier that maybe you want to use the Bluetooth chip, the BT24, as a kind of an auxiliary Bluetooth input for your vehicle, or maybe you want to use a standard RCA to Bluetooth adapter like our ACX BT1. There's lots of different options out there that you could use. Maybe that's the only input. Who knows? What's cool though is that you can set yourself up with DSP presets to be able to do that, and that'll allow you to switch between, maybe DSP preset is number 1 is factory radio. So let's do that. Let's say DSP preset number 1, this is going to be OEM radio input. Let's just say in, okay. And then let's say preset number 2 is going to be my, I don't know, Bluetooth adapter in or something like that. Right, so I can change those names pretty easily, no big deal. Now, the cool part though is being able to save these. So let's say that my OEM radio input is there. I'm going to click and hold just on the number 1 itself. It's going to ask me if I'm sure. If I say yes, it's going to save those settings to the actual amplifier. Now, if I go in here and I say, okay, the Bluetooth adapter, I'm going to have come in on my front high input, because the option port is shared with that front high input, by the way. Let's say my front high input is where this Bluetooth adapter is. Then all I would want to do is go into my outputs and just only select that Bluetooth adapter for each set of output channels. So I'll just make sure front high is selected. And then all I'm doing at that point is just clicking and holding on the number 2. Now you'll notice I didn't just tap it first. I just clicked and held, and now it's going to ask me to overwrite. So now when I hit yes, when I'm on preset number 2, I would be listening to my aftermarket Bluetooth adapter. When I'm on preset number 1, I would be listening to my factory radio. And it's just that simple. Now that ACR3 dash remote, that bass knob, let's call it, is going to be what allows you to switch between those presets. Now, whether you want to do that on a physical dash remote like that bass knob, the ACR3, or you can also do it from our app called DM-Control. DM-Control essentially gives you our ACR3 on your phone, which is great for those that don't want any holes drilled or don't want to have to run cables or don't have a spot for a dash control knob or something like that. So you have 4 presets there. One little bit of just tech tip that I would have for you if you're actually using our software is after you get the basics set up, get your inputs set up, get your crossover points set up. I wouldn't worry about EQ yet, but just get the basics set up to where it plays and it makes noise, it makes sound. At that point, I would go in and save that to all 4 presets. And that way, just in case you happen to jump to a unused preset or one that you weren't planning on using in your system, it's not going to go to a setting that could be potentially damaging to your speakers or a setting that doesn't sound good because it wasn't saved. We've seen that happen before. So I would definitely do your bass tuning, do all of your basic adjustments, and then go in and just save it to all 4. And I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. So once we've got all of our settings dialed in, maybe 80%, we're ready to play and make noise, basically. So I'm going to click and hold on the number 1. Okay, I'm going to hit yes. Now, once that's done saving, I'm not going to click on the number 2 to jump to that preset. I'm just going to click and hold on the number 2. And what that's going to do is it's going to copy all the settings from number 1 over to number 2. I'm now going to do the same thing from 2 to 3. It's going to wipe number 3 and put all the settings from 2 onto 3. And one last time, click and hold on number 4. And it is going to take the settings from number 3 and paste them over to number 4. So now at this point, I would go back into the software. I would do some kind of fine tuning, start getting time delay set up, start getting Acubase set up if you need it, all pass filters, all that type of stuff. Whatever it's fine tuning you want to do at this point with the equalizer, parametric, or graphic EQ, that sort of thing. So that really gives you a basic run through of what the Smart DSP software looks like, kind of how we use it, and how we do that essential setup.
All right. Thank you, Matthew.
My pleasure.
Let's go ahead and take this down for a second. I'm going to keep it on the side because I might have some questions that will require you to get that screen back. But let's go ahead and discuss. We're also going to bring Dave back in here because I'm sure he'll have some commentary as well. You have a drink of water, sir. You deserve it. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Let's start with, we'll back up a little bit because you started the presentation with some hardware stuff, right? So first of all, I do think the what's the word I'm looking for? Retro feel to that physical digital signal processor certainly has some value. And above and beyond what you just said, maybe some of these guys like building these older school cars or maybe generation specific type stuff, man, that fits right in there and still gives them that new wave, process sound and time delay that we need without making it too, digital.
No custom fabrication, right? You're saving yourself hours of trying to fab in this little display, which, when we're trying to do more DSP amongst more customers, not everybody's ready for that type of fabrication. So,
good point.
If I could just add to that, some of these retro classic cars, you know what I mean? They don't want you molding, perfectly placed tweeters and messing with their, I know Jemsen's got some cool solutions that have, very thin baskets, like Morel speakers, for example, for that. But really, to make it sound right, you need those tools like the time delay, and you know what I mean? And that kind of fits right in there. So that was just my 2 cents on that piece. It's super unique, first of all. I also wanted to comment, and this is more of a question, or maybe a comment, about how smart the layout of offering is for system building options from Audiocontrol. What I mean by that is whether it's that piece I just talked about, or the 2 different standalone pieces, or the integrated pieces, and the fact that the integrated pieces have an output with process sound that you can add a non-integrated amplifier, or maybe you have an older amplifier that's lying around. No problem. You can update that system so many different ways. So what I mean by this is, let's say you have a customer that comes in and they have a traditional, we'll call it a traditional sound system. Maybe they got a 4-channel running front and rear, and they've got a mono, running their sub. And they're like, how can I add some spice to my system? How can I get it? Can I get my stage a little bit better? Can I get a little bit more? Yeah, no problem. Add a standalone processor. Maybe the customer had a 4-channel and they want to add a sub. Well, here's a great opportunity to make that. I mean, all I'm trying to express here is the offering the Audiocontrol has allows dealers that flexibility to offer to their customers many in unlimited amount of scenarios. Matt, what do you? Did I get that, or that's what I see?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's you hit the nail on the head. Like, I love being able to take a system, add a single piece of hardware, and just instantly make it sound better. And I really liked it when I was working at the shop in retail with the DQ-DX, because a lot of times, if you just spent, even if it wasn't a lot, let's say it was $150 on a basic single DIN, but you bought it 6 months ago, well, you don't really want to throw it away and buy a better deck just to get better sound, right? You've already made that choice. You already spent that money. It's already installed. And, maybe your significant other is going to kill you if they see a new head unit in the dash. But if you came in looking for better sound and you've already bought all of the components, there's really not a whole lot else out there to do, right? I mean, you either add sound deadening, which, hey, is great, but it's only going to get you so far. The only other thing to really do is add a DSP of some sort. And like I said, if you're buying a $150 head unit and a $300 4-channel and some middle of the road components here, there's nothing wrong with that. But chances are, to me, I say you're probably not buying a $1,500 DSP then, right? Maybe a slightly lesser cost DSP with 80% of the same stuff is going to be more fitting of that system. And there's a lot that you can do with a DQ-DX or a DQ-61. As I mentioned, it's probably more than enough for a vast amount of systems out there.
The other layer I wanted to add to that is I want to commend the output power of those multi-channel DSP integrated amps. I know you mentioned it, but I've sat through a lot of these, and a lot of the multi-channel amplifiers, I'm not going to say they're underpowered, but they're more average powered, right? In the 40 to 60 watt per channel type of category. I mean, Audiocontrol's hitting hard right out of the gate with 100 watts. That's a lot, and you're right. We are so stupid. Like, why do we need this kind of power? Like, really? But yeah, I love it. I mean, trust me, we're not. It's interesting that analogy still definitely stands true. Moving quickly to the software now. Here's my comments for the software. Easy, simple layout. It's basically a 3-tab design, right? You've got your input, your output, and your overall view, right? If I had to break it down real simple. I did have a couple questions though for you, if you don't mind, Matt.
Sure. Yeah.
I noticed that with the demo that you did, you were hooked up to a 4-channel amplifier. So it was convenient that there were 4 tabs on the output stage, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 across the middle. What happens if I'm running a 5-channel? What does that look like? Or if I'm running the 6-channel, does it accommodate the space, or am I now going to a sub menu to get to more channels?
No, it just it makes those little boxes up at the top, where it where it shows the 4 outputs or 6 outputs up there, and it basically just makes them a little bit smaller.
Okay,
and fit
right.
more of them in there. So yeah,
so if there was a
extra
6-channel,
tabs,
there'd be 6 buttons in that same
pages.
space. Okay.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Because that could be
These
confusing.
Are just extra big buttons, basically. So yeah, no, there's no sub menus or sub pages or anything. So
we don't like sub menus. We forget about sub menus, and
no.
then all of a sudden
Keep it simple.
You get a tech support call like, I don't get it. I lost my last 2 channels. Oh, did you click on that? No, I didn't know that. But if you're telling me it kind of auto sizes, I know this sounds stupid, but that's a really clutch point.
Yep.
Is there a way to visualize the entire tuning of the setup by channel, by crossover, frequency as well?
Yeah. So, are you meaning like how to fit it all on the screen and see it all at once?
Yeah, like can I see, like once I've done tuning my 1 and 2 channel, let's say I'm doing a three-way, I have my tweeter set up, my mid set up, my mid bass set up, and then I have my sub put in. Right. Is there a way to visually see that entire system at once as far as the frequency responses?
Yeah, I think the let's see. No, not all at once. I mean, you'd be looking at basically each set of outputs at a time. Otherwise, I guess it depends on what the inputs and stuff are too, though. I mean, if it's like an input from a factory or an aftermarket radio where you're not doing summing and all that stuff, you could definitely get an overall, capture of what that looks like. Otherwise, you would be looking at basically each set of outputs.
So it'd be like 2 channels at a time, basically, is what we're looking at.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. When you were talking about setting up the DRC or the knob, in the beginning during the hardware presentation, you mentioned that it was a multi-purpose knob and could do different functions. Then you showed us how to set the volume if you wanted the system volume, or you went to the output line out and then you set the subwoofer volume. Is there a way to do both?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's where those DSP presets come in. So if you want to set up like preset number 1 to be master volume, but preset number 2 to be sub volume, you can totally do that. And it works really, really well. The other way that some folks do it is in like classic cars. A lot of times they'll run 2 knobs. They'll have them backloaded where the old dual knob, like shaft type radios were. And so they'll put in an ACR3 behind the left side knob, and they'll put in an ACR1 on the right side that goes straight to the sub amp. And then what they end up with is master volume and sub control.
I see.
Yeah. And then they don't have to switch presets to do it. But if you want to do it all from one knob, you can do it. It's just a tap of the button, and you're basically going, okay, tap, turn. Okay, that's master volume. Tap, turn. Now it's sub volume. Like, it's pretty simple once you understand how to use it.
That's pretty slick.
And there's little LEDs that guide you and tell you what you're doing. So,
okay. The electrical RTA is such a huge bonus. So, I mean, that one for sure, it makes it graphical. You have a visual guide to where you need to be or what's happening. So I think that's super clutch, because there are some DSPs that don't have that. And I feel it's definitely missing a tool. So I want to commend you on that. What about phase? Is there any control to adjust phase?
There is in the output view section. There's a 180-degree flip, basically, so you can flip a channel, out of phase, or flip the phase.
180 degrees, basically, and that would have been in the open.
Exactly.
Now. All right.
Yep.
Man, I'm tapped. Dave, you got anything?
Well, I don't know how Matt didn't pass out. He
seriously.
You
see the power supply. One part of it is to the amp. The other power supply is bolted into him. That's not actually Matthew. That's his.
You did a great job, covering everything. I think the only thing I want to add to this is, we got deep. There's a lot of different functionality in the DSP that was talked about, but I think at the end of the day, for the especially for the novice. Installer, that built-in RTA is definitely going to give you an idea of exactly what you're playing with. Because let's be honest, in order to get your aftermarket speakers and aftermarket amplifiers to sound the best possible, we need to have a nice flat signal. And being able to detect that, you got multiple speakers in the car, multiple areas that you can, you might have a 20 speaker system. Who knows, right? So knowing what you're dealing with at the beginning, being able to visually see it and not having to toggle back and forth between, using maybe an external software system that, is REW or something like that, having it all in one place makes it a lot easier. And then once you got all that, I love the fact that you can now, do the curve layovers or overlays, I guess you could say. Because if you don't have a good ear, or you don't trust your ear, or maybe you listen to too much rock music and you're half deaf or whatever it is, now it's just a matter of visually lining up that EQ to one of the preset curves, like the Audio Control factory curve, and you're good to go. You don't have to worry about, well, let me do
Dave, let's be honest. That curve, if you get to that curve, 90% of your customer will be blown away. Let's be honest.
That's it. So, you no longer have to depend on the guy that has the good ear in the shop to do the tuning. You know what I mean?
I want to layer one thing, Matt. I'll let you, and I'll ask you one more comment after that. I sat in this is the first time we've really done, for me personally, a real walkthrough of the software. I know this is the newer version, so I'm not super familiar with the previous version. But if you gave me that software right now and put me in a car with a 5-channel, I think I could tune that in 20 minutes. Or at least get it to that house curve, that tuning stage. Super easy.
Yeah, I mean, that's our whole kind of claim to fame with our DSPs is, obviously when it comes to DSP, there's a lot of choice out there, especially today. Yeah. Every brand out there pretty much has some sort of DSP to offer you and tell you why theirs is the best, etc. And really what we're all about is just being able to do 90% of the cars and make 90% of the people happy. Because let's face it, none of us are ever going to make everyone happy, right? But from a retailer's perspective, from a shop out there that's doing these for installation, doing these retail, you should be able to, let's say the physical installation is done, all the wiring's done, everything's mounted, you're plugging in your laptop. From that point to the point the car rolls out of the bay, it should really take 15 minutes, maybe. This should not take 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. We are not winning IASCA World Finals here, okay? We are trying to make cars sound really, really good, make customers super happy, and get on with our lives and get on to the next one, right? And just because you didn't spend 2 hours on a car doesn't mean that you didn't give the customer a great experience. Now, if you're a consumer and you're watching this and maybe you bought this and you're a DIY guy, great. Again, you should be able to plug into this thing and make your car sound pretty dang good and be happy with it in probably less than 20 or 30 minutes. And then if you want to go back in later and really dive deep and start getting into every little minute detail and adjusting everything, great. But from the get-go, you should be able to make this thing make sound in probably 5 minutes, and you should be able to tune it and get it ready to hit the road in less than 15 or 20 minutes. And that's our whole claim to fame with these, is they're super, super simple, and we've taken a lot of the guesswork out of it.
I know I'm being super chatty on this one, but there was a lot that I learned on this one, and there's 2 more things I have to add. I cannot let you go without saying. The summing on this system, super simple.
Yes.
I mean, probably the most simple summing system or technique or whatever you want to method that I've seen so far. Really smart, really well done on the summing. Cannot be easier. I can't fathom how it can be. The other thing is, which I really like, is the DM-Control app that I was not aware of. That's cool because now you have app control of basic features such as volume and sub without giving the customer access to playing with any of the tuning settings that you would have done. Because if it's an all-in-one app, you can lock them out and this and that. Why not just have 2 separate ones altogether? Great. I think that's a great idea as well.
Yeah, DM-Control is really cool. I'll show you just a quick. It's kind of hard to see with the glare there, but you get the idea. You can see the app itself, and it's just a big volume knob, and then basically your DSP presets down at the bottom. That's all there is to it. So again, for that person that doesn't want to have a knob mounted in their car, or hey, you know what, I'm doing a BMW and the battery's in the trunk, the factory amp where I'm getting signals in the trunk, everything's in the trunk, and I just don't have time to run a cable all the way up to the dashboard.
Or the customer gets to show off the system. The customer gets to show off the system without even sitting in the car. How cool is that? Especially at a car show.
Yeah, you can run, and that's where it's actually perfect, because you can go preset 1, master volume, preset 2, bass knob. I mean, it's couldn't be easier, and it's got a nice look to it. It's a consumer-facing app, so as you mentioned, Ben, you can't dig into a bunch of settings that are going to mess something up. Exactly. You can't get into them. So the installer can password lock the app I showed today, and then give the consumer the DM-Control, and everybody's happy.
Beautiful. I'm not going to make you speak anymore. You've done an incredible job here, Matt, today. Thank you for answering all my stupid questions.
Thanks, guys.
And giving a great presentation. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, man.
Hey, happy to do it. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Take care now. David Singh, Audiocontrol, awesome brand, simple, great solutions. I think we summed it up there. Any last message you have for dealers that stuck with us this far?
Well, I hope they all realize that there is a simpler, friendly GUI for anybody that may feel a little overwhelmed with all the different flavors of DSP that's out there. Audiocontrol's done a really good job. I'm an Apple person, so throw an Android phone in front of me, and I'm confused. Like this is voodoo. But I relate this to the Audiocontrol software because I feel like the GUI is very user intuitive, very easy to figure out. You don't have to go digging to find the different settings and all that type of stuff. It's all laid out very nicely. And the beauty of it is you don't have to utilize everything. Like if you don't want to do presets, and the customer doesn't have the budget for you to spend the extra time.
Although you should take his advice and lock out those first 4
I
presets
agree.
once you have it too. That's a great tip right there.
Yeah, last thing you want is somebody to toggle through their preset by accident, and then hey, there's no audio, because there was nothing set up in it or whatever. So I agree there. But yeah, they've done a really good job, and these new changes are awesome. Parametric EQ, I mean, and being able to adjust the Q and obviously the width of each adjustment is great. It's I like parametric EQs. I think they are easier to do than graphic EQs. But I mean, to each his own. Whatever you like.
And Dave, I wouldn't let you off the show without mentioning how awesome the warranty is when it comes to Audiocontrol.
Yeah, how could we forget about that? It's an industry-leading 5-year warranty. So
that's incredible.
They really stand behind their products. And, from a Jemson standpoint, if you have a problem with an Audiocontrol piece, we're replacing it with a new one, and the turnaround time is quick and fast. And it's a long time of that extra, I guess, breathing space to know that, for the next 5 years, you're good to go. Not that anything's going to happen, but who knows?
It's comfort. It's reassurance. If you're interested in finding out more, as if Matt didn't tell you everything you needed to know on this one, go ahead and check out their website, audiocontrol.com. And if you happen to be in Canada and you're like, man, I need me some of that Audiocontrol, go ahead and give the boys and girls at Jemson a call. Dave is literally standing by. He's staying there all night to take your call right after the show airs. No, he's not.
My phone in here.
Dave, thank you so much for this one. Audiocontrol, always a pleasure to have on, especially when it comes to DSP. And we're definitely going to circle back because lots to talk about for OEM integration as well, and that's coming soon.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care now. All right. What a wrap. That's a wrap on Audiocontrol when it comes to DSP. That was an amazing presentation. And I hope, even if you didn't watch all of it and you kind of skimming through the parts that you're interested in, the takeaway is simple. It's a great product. Design made locally, backed by incredible warranty with some really simple and effective features that I think will definitely help you be more effective and more profitable in the Bay. On that note, we are switching gears. This is our last presentation in the DSP sessions, and we are moving on to our very next sessions, which is going to be all about the source units. Yes, right through until Thursday, August 11th, we are covering you and giving you all the info you need to know of what's new in the source unit category right through till August 11th. And if you want this video and more on Audiocontrol, make sure you check out our website, cmanetworks.com. We have a whole playlist there, many videos on Audiocontrol and everything else that Jemson has to offer. That's it for this one. Thanks for tuning into this CMA workshop presented by SiriusXM. I'm your host, Ben Wu. Until next time, we connect.
Roll it down.
I am.
You don't need a car to listen to SiriusXM. You can listen anywhere. You know that, right?
What? Kevin Hart's Laugh Out Loud Radio.
Kevin, you could use your phone.
What? What?
Alexa, play Kevin Hart's Laugh Out Loud Radio on SiriusXM.
What?
This is how I know you're getting old. I guess that was it.
What?